Hi, I'm Tim, and welcome to Watch You Want. Thanks for logging on. I hope you're thirsty for more luxury watch reviews because today we've got the Rolex Oyster Perpetual GMT-Master II 16710. And yes, nothing quenches your thirst like a nice Coke bezel on a cloudy day. It's a little bit overcast here in Hollywood, Florida, but inside the sun is always shining on Rolex, one of our favorite brands. This is one of the most iconic models from one of our favorites. It's also an important landmark because many argue that the 1989 GMT-Master II, the 16710, really represented the birth of the modern GMT-Master as we know it today. And there are a couple of features that emerged from that 1980s GMT transitional period that found their way into this watch, along with some of the features of the earlier, finer cased GMT Masters, to render this really one of the definitive references among that iconic GMT Master II production rank. So here's the bottom line. On the wrist, 40 millimeters as always. The watch wears sober, it wears clean, it wears cool. The Coke bezel is distinct from the blue and red Pepsi, the all black, and the bicolor, sometimes all caramel root beer or shaken root beer bezels, in that it's quite color keyed to the dial itself. You've got the black that matches the lacquered dial. Now, after the mid-1980s, Rolex was using all applied white gold indexes and white gold hands with a glossy dial base. So that's one of the legacies of the transitional period that you find in this 16710. You can also see that the thick case of the 16760, the so-called Sophia Loren or the Fat Lady, has been phased out here in favor of that finer, thinner, traditional GMT Master case form, a little bit more traditional, a throwback to the 70s and the 60s in a good way. So you get that modern aesthetic with the glossy dial, the white gold indexes and hands, and then you also get a finer, flatter wearing, flusher fitting GMT Master II. And that's to the advantage of anyone who wants to use this as a formal watch, in as much as this easily fits under any kind of a dress cuff. Now, originally released during the early 1950s and 1954 as a joint development venture between Rolex and Pan Am Airlines, this was really the first pilot's watch to display 24-hour time with the ability to offset to local airport time using a bidirectional 24-hour calibrated bezel. Now, originally, these watches could display two time zones, but only upon demand. That is, when you offset the bezel from the 24-hour hand to account for your GMT plus or minus status of a local airport. It's a little bit cumbersome if you just want to see two times at once. So in 1983, the first of the true dual times, independent dual time, Rolex GMT Master IIs emerged, but that was the Sophia Loren, the Fat Lady. It didn't wear with elegance. 1989 rolls along and you get this watch. The 16710, also available with the Coke bezel as you see here, one of three varieties available in stainless steel. This watch gives you that elegant traditional case form, but with the true independent 24-hour hand that can show an entirely different time than the local hour hand. Using the offset of the bezel, I should add, that gives you the ability to watch three time zones simultaneously on this watch. Not bad. Now, you could see that the fit with the traditional 3-link Oyster bracelet, very light on the wrist, very flush. I don't talk about bracelet fit too often and how a bracelet conforms to the wrist below the lugs themselves. I usually talk about how the watch conforms at the lugs, and on my 6 1/3 inch 16 centimeter wrist, you can see this one is quite flush fitting. Despite being one of the more complicated Rolex models available, it really wears no thicker than a Submariner, and the Oyster bracelet is pretty much interchangeable from model to model during the 1980s. This one having been built in the mid-1990s, it is a T series, wears exactly the same. The watch didn't change a whole lot before 1997, and I want to talk a little bit about some of those changes that came along and why this particular Coke bezel is doubly discontinued. I might even say triply discontinued. Now, first and foremost, today's GMT Master II as of 2005 wears much larger, although still nominally 40 millimeters. Today the watch has what's called the super case. It's much thicker, it's much fuller, it's trying to project the wrist presence of a bigger watch without changing the historic 40 millimeter size of the watch. Like I said, it doesn't always fit the same wrist that might have fit the earlier, finer 40 millimeter 5-digit reference models. So that's the first sense in which this one is a discontinued collectible. Second, I want to talk about the Coke bezel. Again, since 2005, this bezel The Coke combination of red with black has not been available on the GMT-Master II, so if you want one, you've got to reach back to the pre-owned, the vintage. You've got to look for a good example, a watch with outstanding condition from a reputable seller. This watch, which you can see in high-resolution images on our website, Watch You Want, features outstanding condition, and it's a great example, featuring its original bracelet, very full lugs, very full crown guard shoulders, an outstanding bezel, a glossy, beautifully detailed dial, and immaculate indexes and hands. This one is the real deal. Check it out in high res, and I think you'll agree with me. This is a bit of a time capsule watch from the late 1990s, from the grunge era. Now, the last sense in which this watch is discontinued and collectible, remember I said the watch didn't change much before 1997? Well, what I mean by that is that after 97, the tritium indexes, that is the radioactive beta emitter that's used to activate the lume, was swapped out for luminova. Now, the tritium dials are more traditional, they're scarcer. Over time, they will develop a distinct patina, and they will begin to turn and age, develop a little bit of an ecru tone that's considered very beautiful and sought by collectors. So, on 3 counts, this watch could be considered the triple collector, the triple discontinue. The dial, obviously the case and the reference, and the bezel, all highly sought by collectors today, and it has the historical feather in its cap of being arguably the first of the true modern GMT Master references. So an important milestone in Rolex history, something collectors love, and personally, I think this watch is outstanding. If you like the combination of the black, the white metal, and the red, with corresponding GMT 24-hour hand set off against that bezel, this one just zings me. I really like the look of it. All black is perhaps too sober. Pepsi perhaps a bit too jovial. This watch wears really well with just about anything. Long sleeves or short, formal or informal. As of the 16750 of 1981, all of these watches were rated to 100 meters, 330 feet. So realistically, unless you're going deep sea diving or going down in a bell, this is all the water resistance you'll ever need. Although it is a pilot's watch, that doesn't mean it can't get wet. So check out this Rolex Oyster Perpetual GMT-Master II 16710, the Coke bezel. I think that if you're just a little bit thirsty for a historical Rolex with an impeccable pedigree and outstanding condition, this just might be the watch you want.